Hello and welcome to this module on Introduction to Communication. Being a teacher, the purpose of this module is to help all students studying in the field of communication to understand this topic better. So let's begin. To live isolated is a dreadful feeling. Communication helps us to interact, share, talk it out, understand, relate, promote, inform, and express. It is a very dynamic process. In scientific terms, communication is basically considered to be a sharing of information between a sender and a receiver. So, do only human beings communicate? Well, obviously the answer is no. Communication occurs all around, even in animals, in nature, and creation at large. But for this study, we are only going to discuss communication that happens amongst human beings. Edwin Emery Philip, in his book Introduction to Mass Communication, says that the study of communication involves two aspects. The first aspect, a broad comprehension of the mechanical means and the underlying theories of communication. And the second aspect, more importantly, an understanding of how we use these tools in our daily round of informing, influencing, inspiring, convincing, frightening, and even entertaining one another. So let's come to the basic definition of communication. While defining communication, it is necessary that we go to the etymological roots of the word communication. Etymologically, the origin of the word communication is derived from the Latin noun communis, which means commonality, and the Latin verb communicare, which means to share or to make common. Different scholars define communication in different ways. Here are a few definitions by renowned scholars. So we take a look at the first definition. Murphy, Hildebrandt, and Thomas. Communication is a process of transmitting and receiving verbal and nonverbal messages. It is considered effective when it achieves the desired response or reaction from the receiver. Lewis Allen says that communication is a bridge of meaning. It involves a systematic and continuous process of telling, listening, and understanding. Berylson and Steiner says that communication is the transmission of information, idea, emotions, skills, etc. by the use of symbols, words, pictures, figures, graphs, etc. It is the act or process of transmission that is usually called communication. We now come to the second topic in communication, and that is the elements in the process of communication. The elements in communication process determine the quality of communication. A problem in any one of these elements can reduce communication effectiveness. Communication process thus involves the following basic elements: a sender, message, a medium or a channel, the receiver, a feedback, and noise. There is sharing of information, or there is a message transmission between the sender who sends the message and the receiver who receives the message. The sender sends a message to a receiver through a medium. The receiver receives the message and interprets it. These terms are technically defined below. The sender makes a message based on what one wants to communicate. It could be a concept, an idea, or an information. This process is called encoding. After encoding, the sender transmits the message through the medium. The medium may vary based on how the sender wants to send the message to the receiver. The recipient receives the message and starts deciphering or understanding it. This process is called decoding. The recipient further gives a reaction or a response. This is called a feedback. The feedback could be direct or through the use of a medium or a channel. This is gradually followed by the decoding of the feedback that is received. The concept of noise then comes over here. It includes any element that causes disruption or disturbance in the process of communication. It could also be anything that distorts the message. If feedback does not occur for any given reason, it is called one-way communication. The cycle continues depending on the sender and the receiver and their need to communicate. Let me give you an example. For instance, I see someone and I say, "Hello there, how are you?" And the person, the receiver, listens to my message, "Hello, how are you?" and says, "I am fine, teacher. Thank you. How are you, miss?" Now that means the receiver understood my hello, how are you, very clearly and responded and gave me a feedback saying that he or she is fine. Now, there was the sender, that is me, who sent the message. The recipient received the message, decoded the message and responded to me because my message was very clear. But let's take, for example, while I was speaking and saying, "Hello, how are you?" there was a disturbance. There was a big noise that happened just in the neighborhood. And the person did not hear my saying, "Hello, how are you?" which means the person will not respond to me. Then it becomes a one-way communication. Plus, because of noise, the communication gets hampered, as a result of which that person will not answer to me. This is a simple example of what a basic process of communication includes. So, there is a sender who represents me perhaps, or a person A sending a message to a person B. So, with that we conclude our lesson on elements of communication. Our next topic is characteristics of communication. Communication is not static. It has various characteristics. Some of these are enumerated below. Firstly, communication is a two-way process. It has a sender and a receiver. Communication cannot occur in a vacuum. It is dynamic in nature. There is an exchange of information between the sender and the receiver. This process further elaborates when there is a feedback. The receiver, after decoding the message, gives a feedback. In this process, the receiver now becomes a sender and vice versa. So it's very dynamic. Communication always has a purpose. The purpose could vary from sender to sender, but there is always a purpose. The reason for me communicating with you is to teach you. So there is a purpose. Let's look at the third point, contextual communication. Communication always happens in a context. The sender and the receiver communicate in a context. Each of them will be influenced by the context that surrounds them. For instance, when I am communicating, I have my background and I talk to you with my own experience. You decode the message through your own experience. Communication can take a form. It could be sharing or a request or an order or an expression of anger. Communication could be formal or informal. Based on the context, the communication is occurring. There could also be use of signs and symbols in communication. It need not always be verbal. Communication can occur through words, actions, signs, symbols, graphs, expressions, etc. The scope of communication is that it can help a person to even deal with a situation. So communication is very dynamic and it has different characteristics that we have just seen. You can add more to it. We now go to our next topic, and that is functions of communication. The functions of communication are numerous. I will be mentioning a few in this module. You can add as many as you want to. The first function, information. One of the primary functions of communication is to inform another person. In any given field, whether family, friendships or business, sharing of information is integral for communication to occur. The second function, social needs. Communication helps one to fulfill one's social needs. The needs to be identified, belong, control, be affectionate and receive affection are very innate, and communication helps in the same. The third function is practical needs. Communication helps one to fulfill the practical needs. For instance, simple things like I want to buy a product from a shop, asking someone to pass an object, etc. All of this comes under practical needs. Another function of communication is education. Communication helps in the process of education. It is an important element in the transfer of knowledge, ideas and concepts to spread literacy and create awareness. So, education is a very important function of communication. Coordination. Communication helps people to coordinate, organize programs and things. Another important function of communication is persuasion. Persuasion could include various dimensions of persuasion. For instance, a mother persuades a child to drink milk for good health. But persuasion could also mean that different organizations persuade you to buy their product. For example, advertisements. Another important function of communication is motivation or raising the morale. An individual could motivate others through actions, words, deeds. One could always encourage and boost the morale of those around through kind words of encouragement, motivation, and inspiration. A good teacher is a good communicator who motivates and raises the morale of her students by encouraging them to achieve their dreams and work hard for it. Instruction. Communication also helps in instructions. It is important while driving to follow the instructions of safe driving. Giving an advice. Communication could also mean giving an advice to someone. Warning. Communication could include warning. For instance, the Weather Forecast Department issues warning regarding the weather conditions to the people of the state. So if there is a cyclone, there could be a warning. If there is a heavy rainfall, there could be a warning. So the function of warning. Another function of communication is connectivity. In today's arena, communication has jumped leaps and bounds and has led to a connectivity unimaginable before. Social networking forums have led to people connecting globally. Networking. The world today, with its digital activity, has become a constant forum for networking. It is not surprising then that social networking forums have become major forums for communication and networking. So these are few of the functions that we have explained in this educational module. The next module, we will discover barriers or noise in communication.